and their grandma has a video on what a long femored squat looks like. Oh, you have to lean over more. Oh, these people have an upright torso. Oh, you need more dorsiflexion, blah, blah, blah. But what does that actually mean? How is that quantified by your body and what it needs to do more of or less of based on your body's anthropometrics, which is your body's measurements, right? So our arm length, leg length, torso length. What is the hidden cost? What are the specific muscles that have to work overtime just because of the bones that you were born with? We're gonna dive into that today. So I'm gonna try and make it fun. So I hope you guys really enjoy it. Okay, so before we get into the meat of the video, we are going to define what you are, whether you are a short femored person, an average femored person, or a long femored person. So first and foremost, we're gonna start with our height. Height in inches. I am 5'9". So for me, that would be 69 inches. Next, we're going to talk about your femur length. So the way to measure that, I'm going to draw a bone. It is just a bone. It is not a femur. I just cannot draw. So it's a bone. Okay, right. So now at the top of your bone, this is your hip, you're going to find kind of a knobby process. That is your greater trochanter. And that is where you're going to start your measurement. So take your measuring tape and find that knobby point, put your measuring tape right underneath it. That is where your hip starts. You're going to measure down to your knee, to your lateral femoral condyle, so lateral condyle, which is like a little knobby part down by your knee. That is where your femur ends and your tibia begins. This is going to be your distance, right? So this is your femur length. So then for me, that is about 21.5 inches, roughly. So let's say we take that number, we're going to take the length of your femur. So for me, that's 21.5 inches. We're going to divide that by 69 inches, or, if you want to look at it like this. But what that comes out to me is 31, and that is 31%, meaning that is how much of my body is made of femur. So what does that mean for you, and what does that mean for me? So a short femur definition is going to be your femur length is less than 26% of your total height. Average femur length is 26% to 27% of your total height. Long femur length is greater than 27% of your total height. I am 31%, so I am firmly in the camp of long femur. So go ahead and take these measurements and figure out where you belong and use that to kind of see where you fall when we talk about the different proportions in the video. Today, we're not just talking about how it looks. We're cracking the code on the different strength, mobility, and force requirements for long femurs versus short femurs. This isn't an excuse. It is your operating manual. So let's get into it. First and foremost, we have to understand that the squat is a lever system. In this lever system, for the squat, your hip is your fulcrum, your femur is your lever arm, and the barbell on your back is your load. So now let's talk about mechanical disadvantage. So the longer your lever arm is in a lever system, the heavier the load is going to feel, or the greater mechanical disadvantage you are placed in. Let's use another simpler exercise so that you can picture this. Let's say you are doing a dumbbell lateral shoulder raise, and that's the exercise where your dumbbells will start down by your hips, and then you lift up to about shoulder height. And if you look at that exercise, your lever arm is very, very long. The dumbbell, the load, so you're holding a dumbbell, right? That load is very far away from your fulcrum, which would be your shoulder. Now, let's take that same weight, whatever weight you use for your lateral shoulder raise, and you bend your arm. Now you've essentially cut your lever arm in half. Your fulcrum is still your shoulder, but now you can press that weight, and that same weight, no matter what it is going to feel significantly lighter than it did when it was held out at arm length with a double length lever, which again, that distance, that measurement is going to vary based on a person's unique anthropometrics, but let's just say about a half, right? So the longer your lever arm, no matter what lever system you're in, and the further from the fulcrum your load is, the greater mechanical disadvantage that you are going to be put in, the situation you're going to put in. So that being said, now let's use that example in a squat, right? If you have longer femurs, to achieve the goal of the squat, which is for the load to stay over your midfoot, you now have to lean further forward to counteract how far back your hip goes because of the length of your femur. So now you have that greater distance between the load and the fulcrum, what we talked about with your arm being out, and now that weight, no matter what it is heavier than if that fulcrum, your hips, were moved closer, right? So that would be a shorter femur to the load that you have on your back. So with that information, you can use that to see what exactly that might look like or what that means. Let's talk more about that forward lean. That forward lean is really what unlocks the rest of this madness of a squat and what determines what characteristics mean what in the grand scheme of a squat. So if you have long femurs, your squat is less of a knee dominant movement and more of a hip dominant movement. It's a close cousin to the deadlift, but even closer as a good morning. So if you don't know what a good morning is, that is when the barbell's on your back and you're leaning forward as far as you can, keeping your legs relatively straight and then bringing it back up. It's predominantly a posterior chain exercise overall, emphasizing the hamstrings, but there is also a lot of erector spinae, however you pronounce it, engagement to keep your spine straight under that load as well. So your number one requirement for being a hip dominant squatter, so a long femured squatter, is going to be that your back angle is horizontal. This means your glutes and hamstrings have to be absolute monsters. They have to be able to do so much more work than a short femur squatter. They are primary engines responsible for extending your hips against a massive lever arm, very long lever arm. We'll go over this in another video, but we did some of the breakdowns of some of my athletes that I train with, and it is wild, the difference, right? So they are the primary engines responsible for extending your hips against a massive lever arm. If your glutes are weak, you'll never stand up out of the hole with a heavy weight because of the angle that you are put in. Now, this isn't entirely related and we're kind of getting in the weeds here, but when you're at the bottom of a squat, your glutes are stretched far further than the glutes of a short femur athlete. What this means is that your glutes, not only do they need far greater strength, but they need far greater strength through a greater range of motion, because the strongest that any muscle in your body is at the middle of its range of motion, right? So at the ends, so fully stretched out, my biceps are at its weakest, fully contracted, they're also very weak. Where they are strongest is right in the middle here. I could probably hold significantly greater load in an isometric contraction here than I could here or than I could all the way contracted. So the safest and strongest your muscle fibers are always in the middle of their range of motion. As you get to the ends of their range of motion, they are far more fragile and they are far weaker. So training a greater range of motion as a long femured athlete through your hips is going to be required in order to become a good squatter with long femurs. So your number two requirement as a long femured athlete, you need extensive spinal erector strength and mobility. The horizontal torso means your erectors are working isometrically to hold a heavy load on a bent over back, right? So the further forward that you lean, the stronger your erectors are going to have to be in order to hold that load where it is. If you are upright, you obviously don't need that. You're going to need a different type of core strength, but we'll get into that later. This is a colossal demand for core strength. Rounding over isn't just a form issue, it's a sign the load has exceeded your posterior chain capacity. So if you know that you're someone that as your hips come up, your shoulders round forward and you create this C with your upper body and with the anterior side of your body, what that means is that your erectors, your spinal erectors, are weaker than they need to be to stand up the load that you are trying to stand up, right? So the load that you are under. Your number 3 requirement, you need extensive ankle and hip mobility. You need every millimeter or forward knee travel you can get. Why? Because the more that your knees can travel forward, the more upright you can keep your torso, shortening your brutal lever arm. Right? So we did talk about your load wanting to stay over your midfoot. Let's say this is your load and we're talking about your midfoot here. If your knees can go further forward, then that means the load can stay over that midfoot without as much leaning over as you might have to do if you don't have good dorsiflexion and your hips shoot really far back. So that is just to help out with you staying over that midfoot. This means that elite ankle dorsiflexion and hip flexion mobility are non-negotiable for you. So not only do you need to be able to move into posterior glide extensively because your femur does need more space to go, you also need to have good hip flexor mobility to allow you to flex that much. So we can also get into the weeds and pelvic mobility, but we can maybe do that on a different video. Now, the hidden mobility demand is going to be hamstring length, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. Hamstrings for a squat, a lot of people look at me crazy when I talk about that, but absolutely. With extreme forward lean, your hamstrings are stretched intensely at the bottom of a squat with your hip flexion and your knee extension. So bear with me here. At the bottom of a squat, your knee is flexed. That means you have some tension already at the insertion point of your hamstrings, which is your knee or tibial femoral joint, right? So if we are simultaneously stretching that hamstring over your hip, so underneath your glute muscles into your pelvis, we're talking tension, and then we're talking extension, tension through contraction, tension through extension. And then we are also going to have to fire at that bottom position and create an enormous amount of force in order for you to stand up under the load that you have on you. Poor hamstring mobility will pull your pelvis into posterior tilt. That is what, when you see a butt wink, that's what that is. That is your hamstring not being able to stretch open over that hip while simultaneously contracting at that knee joint. So what may happen is you will contract down at the knee joint and you will contract here, pulling your pelvis under, creating a butt wink. We don't want that. That's not great. That puts your pelvis in a really awkward position. You tend to have injuries at that point because your sacroiliac joint will move. You'll have some torsion at your pelvis. So you do want to keep that as neutral as possible. That also robs your power. So from a performance standpoint, at the bottom, it is impossible. It's not impossible. It is not preferable to generate force in a posteriorly tilted pelvic position because it's not going to be great. And you're also going to put a lot of force on your lumbar vertebrae there. Long femur athletes need supple and ultra strong hamstrings. So we did talk a lot about long femurs here, mainly because that's kind of a trouble spot in squats. You have to do a lot more damage control as a long femured athlete than you would as a short femured athlete. But short femured athletes have their own concerns when it does come to squatting, and they have their own performance points when it comes to how to improve their squat, right? So on the flip side, if you have short femurs and a long torso, you hit the squat jackpot for mechanics. You can stay beautifully upright, but your challenges are completely different. Your number one requirement as a short femured squatter is you need massive quadricep strength. So if anything's gonna hold you back as a long torsoed athlete, squatting is gonna be quad strength, and then it's gonna be core strength. So your erectors, but also your anterior core. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So your knees travel far forward, your shins are steep. This places the quadriceps as the star of the show. They have the best leverage and are responsible for extending the knee under a huge load. If your quads aren't strong, you'll stall out at the bottom, even with perfect form. Your number two requirement is going to be hip flexor and anterior core strength. To maintain that upright torso under load, you need serious strength in the muscles that fight extension. Your hip flexors, especially the rectus femoris, right? Those are the ones that you see, the 6-pack, 8-pack, 10-pack, whatever they might be. And your anterior core, I'm so sorry, I said that wrong. Your hip flexors, especially the rectus femoris, which is your biggest quadricep, it crosses both your knee and hip flexor joint, so is very, very involved in the squat. And then your anterior core, your abs, they work overtime to prevent your chest from falling forward. And it's a constant isometric battle, particularly between your hip flexors and then your anterior core structure. The hidden challenge of being a short femured squatter is your knee health and patellar tracking. With all of that knee travel, patellar tendonitis and knee pain can be a common issue if form slips. You must be obsessive about driving your knees out to track them over your toes and engage the VMO. Depth is easier for you, but managing sheer force on the knees is an eternal task. When your movement is primarily controlled, or the amount that you can squat is really limited by your quadriceps, what's going to happen is they're going to do the most work. And so if you have an imbalance between your quadriceps, because quads 4, right? You have your vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, and rectus femoris. If you have an imbalance there, something is a lot stronger than one of the other muscles, you're gonna have some variation in your patellar tracking, which can cause knee pain. And since the force on that knee joint is coming from your quadriceps, there are a multitude of things that can happen. So one of the things you want to really do is take care of your knees, and by that making sure that everything is balanced and that there's a lot of mobility there. We can get into the weeds on this one as well, but your knees should have some rotation to them, meaning that your tibia should rotate fairly freely from your femur, and that will help keep your knees healthier as you are asking for so much force to be generated by your quadriceps. So let's talk about how you would tailor training and mobility for you to improve your squat according to your anthropometrics and your biomechanics, right? So what do you do with this information, which is really the key of what I do? You stop copying the Instagram lifter with a different body than you, and you train your weaknesses. You don't piss and moan because this person can squat so much. You don't sit there and wonder why. You're watching this video, so you're learning why you may not be squatting as much as you want, but then you take action, right? You attack the things that you need to make your squat solid and make it strong. So with a long femur crew, your basics are going to be on the strength side. You want to prioritize hip thrusts, Romanian deadlifts, and good mornings. Build that monster posterior chain so that it can help you out when you're trying to lift as much weight as you can. When it comes to mobility, live in a deep squat hold. Work on ankle dorsiflexion and hip internal rotation drills, and make sure those hamstrings are as supple as possible. Make sure they can create as much distance as possible. For the short femur crew, bombard your quads with front squats, pause squats, leg press, and sissy squats. Because you don't have as much of a problem getting into the position of a squat, that is not what you need to focus on. You need to focus on making sure that position that you can get into, that wonderful squat position, is as solid as possible. Do not neglect your anterior core with exercises like dead bugs, Pallof presses, supine Sorensen holds, things that make it super solid so that holding that barbell on your back and holding yourself upright while your legs are bent is not a challenge. For your prehab, work on your knee extension work. working on banded knee drills, and lots of tempo squats to build resilience in your knees. So let's conclude it all. Let's break it all down. Your squat is your squat. Stop trying to squat like someone else. Your femur length dictates your mechanics, which dictates your strengths and your weaknesses. The long femur lifter isn't doing it wrong. They're fighting a harder physics battle than people that have shorter femurs. The short femur lifter isn't cheating. They're just built for the lift. Embrace your anthropometry. Train for your body. And the next time you see a squat that looks different from yours, instead of criticizing them, you'll understand the completely different story happening underneath their skin. And this includes yourself. Instead of beating yourself up for not squatting like this person, learn more about your body. This video will help, and also my series will help. But learn more about how you can make your body do something better that it may not be that great at, because there are so many ways. So this is the first in a series breaking down individual anthropometrics. What should I cover next? Arms for bench press, torso length for deadlifts? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear it, and I love tailoring things for you guys. If this helped you understand your body better, hit that like button and subscribe. It truly helps my channel. It's little, I'm doing it myself, and I know I'm not very good, but I'm trying my best. Now, go lift something heavy and do it properly, and do it the way your body will be happier to do it. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to going over something different with you in the next video.